an Excelsior Studios original production. Throughout this podcast, sensitive subjects such as sexual assault, eating disorders, and suicidal thoughts will be mentioned. Listen with care. And sometimes throughout this podcast, I will use AI to bring social media posts and messages to life. While the voices you are hearing are fake, the words they are reading are 100% real, and I will be sure to point them out to you throughout the episode so you don't get confused.
Gosh, I would say the past 5 to 7 years. I was lying stating that she was working at the State House and that they had given her Indy Fuel season tickets, and she was taking family members and associates, people that she was, associate with, down to these hockey games and stuff, and driving them in her Tesla and claiming that the Tesla was gifted to her. I mean, the slew of lies just continued to grow and grow and grow.
So, Megan's a big spender, or at least she likes to appear to be one. As you know by now, Megan was very proud of her Tesla, living in an upscale suburb of Indianapolis called Fishers, going out to eat frequently at local American restaurants like the Ale Emporium. The problem is that no one knew where Megan was getting the money to afford this lifestyle.
She told me that she worked with the governor. That's how she was able to afford a Tesla. Because I asked her how she was able to afford this. I was like, how are you able to afford this car? Like, these are like really expensive.
Megan would claim to work at the Indiana State House or be a political consultant, or in later years, she would claim to be a teacher. As you know by now, most of that wasn't true.
I've never known her to actually work and actually hold a job, like an actual real. And I know that she claimed that she worked at the State House or worked for senators or whatever the BS lie of the week was, but there was never any sort of context with it or any way to prove it. So I mean, like I said, I didn't put too much thought into it when the whole thing about the fraudulently getting, scamming people out of money thing started to come to light. I was like, well, this is long overdue.
So how was she affording this lifestyle? Well, a lot of it we figured was funded by some level of financial fraud. The reason she was arrested in the first place, which prompted the group to come together and piece together her scams, was because of a rental scam, which Megan eventually pled guilty to and is currently serving time in the Hamilton County Jail for at the time of this recording in August of 2024. But there's a lot more financial crimes that Megan has been accused of. Apparently, it's pretty typical for fraudsters to start small.
The reason why police want you to report even the smallest things is because these build up into the big things. Scammers start little, see what they can get away with. They get more confident.
And if we've learned anything about Megan, we know there's definitely a sense of confidence there with all of the insane things and stories and lies she's been able to tell. So today on this episode, we're going to go through some of the scams Megan seems to have run for her financial benefit, starting with the small, low-level stuff to the bigger, more brazen scams. I'm Amanda, and this is Don't Waste This Effing Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner. Don't Waste This Podcast is a completely independent podcast. It was written, recorded, produced, and edited by me, Amanda. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this channel if you're listening on YouTube, or rate me 5 stars if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you think your friends would like this, please be sure to share with them too. Because this is independent, you won't be bombarded by intrusive advertisements or sponsorships throughout the show. You're welcome. If you'd like to learn how to make your own podcast like this one, I've put together a course that teaches you how to do that, and that will be linked in the description below. If you want to hear more from me, maybe get your head checked, but I do a daily news updates podcast about U.S. politics, the current election, national security, foreign policy, the Middle East conflict. That link will be in the description as well.
I was able to get my hands on Megan's financial disclosure statement. She had listed on this finance document that she had about $1,000 in her campaign account.
That's Chloe, detailing some of her findings about Megan in a Twitter space soon after Megan's arrest. By now, you know that Meghan messaged hundreds of people over the years for money.
One thing that I think Meghan did that was kind of smart was that she went around asking people for low dollar donations. Hey, can you give me $5, $10, $15?
Chloe's right. Meghan's kind of a genius for this. I have to hand it to her. A lot of what she did with this is really smart. If you're unfamiliar with campaign finance, and most people are, it's an incredibly complex system in America that high-level politicians like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama have been fined for. I mean, Trump's 34 felony convictions came from reporting errors on campaign finance reports. So even high-level people can mess this stuff up. The system, while highly complex, can be taken advantage of, and Meghan likely took advantage of it. Chloe found that around Meghan's race for county commissioner in 2018, she would message people that she friended on Facebook asking for small dollar campaign donations, and she must have had some success.
I've talked to several people who are like, yeah, she asked me for $5 or $10 for X, Y, and Z, whether it was a walkathon, whether it was campaign donation, whether it was those kind of things. So that would kind of fall into that low dollar, no one's really kind of looking at it, small ball stuff. That, though, builds up over time.
In the political world, getting small dollar donations can be a big deal when running for office. Long story short, if you have a lot of small dollar donations, it makes your campaign look like you have grassroots support. So it's very common for political campaigns at all levels to fundraise for small dollar donations of $1, $5, $10. If you're politically active, you might get texts from various candidates and campaigns throughout the day requesting these small dollar donations. However, when that donation totals under $100, the campaign does not need to report these amounts and donors on their campaign finance reports. Looking back, Chloe and others began to realize that this money that Meghan was raising likely didn't go towards running any sort of campaign back in 2018. She didn't have campaign staff. She didn't have a website up, although it looks like she had someone build one for $5,000 that she reported, and she seems to have sent them a check in the mail which bounced. She didn't have yard signs, and she obviously didn't win that seat. But being that she filed to run, she could open a campaign account and collect those small dollar donations, which she wouldn't have to file. And her pool of people that she was messaging for these donations were mostly politically active. She met them through political groups and Facebook and such. So these messages wouldn't have seemed as unusual as if they were to a regular audience. And it's likely that this is where the beast was born. The theory is that Meghan would live off of these donations for a while and use them for her personal expenses. And once she learned that she can make a little bit of money from this, she kept going. A few years later, she began messaging people for donations to a walk for suicide awareness and prevention. The message would read like this.
Hi there, I'm going to be walking in this walk to prevent suicide this month. This cause really means a lot to me as I've struggled with suicidal thoughts in my past. I was wondering if you could please give 10 to the cause. I'd appreciate any amount.
That's the AI voice of Meghan reading a message she sent to someone requesting money for the suicide charity in December of 2019. And just as an aside, very bizarre to mention to people that you've never met before that you've contemplated suicide, but this became the next scheme that Meghan ran after the campaign finance scheme. It's important to note that this charity for suicide prevention is not named and does not seem to exist. She was also messaging people around December for this money. It is highly unlikely that an outdoor suicide prevention walk would be hosted in a Midwestern city, Indianapolis, Indiana, in the winter when there would likely be snow on the ground. However, Meghan would message people year after year asking for donations in December for this suicide prevention charity. And if people replied and donated, she would message them more frequently. Looking back, people believe Megan was pocketing this money for herself. It does not appear she ever filed a 501c3 or nonprofit charity for this. She didn't claim that she was running the charity either. She just claimed to be walking in this walk. Some people who spoke out that she had messaged them for this requested. Some of the people who received this message, and she sent it to hundreds of people, said that when they clicked on the link, it didn't work, and then she would ask for a Venmo instead because the website was having issues. So, again, she very well could have just been pocketing this money, but she's never been charged for this. And $10 here and there when a girl you don't know is messaging you when it's supposedly for a good cause and she's confiding in you that she's had suicidal ideations before, clearly this worked on some people and must have been successful. I mean, 10 people giving you $10, that's $100. For transparency's sake, this is what did it for me. I tapped out and unfriended her at the first or second message like this that I received, but I have friends personally that received this message and donated to her, so I know that this worked. And that's because Megan is nothing if not persistent. It's believed that Megan used to message hundreds, if not thousands of people, these copied and pasted messages per day, hoping that people would bite. And we actually have court documents from the summer of 2024 to back up that claim. But more on that in future episodes. Around July of 2022, Megan came up with the third scheme in this same vein of asking for low dollar amounts from people on social media. She took advantage of the hashtag Clear the List campaign. If you're unfamiliar, teachers will create Amazon wish lists in the lead up to back to school and fill them with classroom supplies. Well-meaning people will look through that hashtag and buy things from those lists for these teachers, which will send the items directly to those teachers so that they can stock their classrooms. Megan claimed to be a teacher and jumped on this trend.
Hey there. In case you haven't heard, I will be teaching my first year at an alternative high school here in Indiana. Can you please consider looking at my Amazon wish list and buying one thing for my classroom? Feel free to buy used if that's an option. Let me know if you have any questions. Please do not be negative. If you don't want to buy or can't, there's no obligation.
When people would go through Megan's list, they would notice some items that seemed out of place. Women's size 9 Skechers, erotic books, things like that. People would tweet at her saying they thought she had mistakenly put some personal items on her public list, to which Megan would either reply that no, that item was for a student in need, in the case of the Skechers, or she would outright block the person, in the case of the graphic novel. Another problem with the Clear the List scheme that Megan ran is that she was not a teacher. While she does hold a graduate degree for Ball State University, it does not seem that she has been able to hold a teaching job, although she did at one point obtain a teaching license, and she is claimed to have had a teaching job for 1 week before being let go.
So your Amazon list, were those items for you or were those for students?
Actually, for students.
I don't know. It just seems pretty fishy that, I mean, you only worked, how long did you actually work in a classroom though? Mount Vernon, you said a week. Options was what? Around that same time?
Yeah. I mean, I have another friend that you can ask him. I moved it in. I took my stuff that I had, books, stickers, supplies, pencils, notebooks, erasers. I took all that stuff in the classroom with me.
So why keep sharing the list if you're not teaching? If you're not actively in the classroom? Do you see where the dots don't connect?
Yeah.
So it was for you.
Yeah.
That's from a call Chloe had with Megan in the summer of 2023 after her arrest. So clearly, Megan took advantage of well-meaning people, asking them for small dollar donations, to which they obliged, and this worked for her for years to some extent. It's unlikely that this was her only source of income. It looks like Megan has done tutoring, she drove for Lyft, and she received student loans for her undergraduate and master's degrees, which she was probably living off of. However, Megan eventually graduated, and the student loan money dried up. She probably also got confident from her smaller schemes working, so she moved on to larger schemes, like the rental fraud scheme.
A Hamilton County woman is facing serious charges accused of scamming several people out of rental homes. Logan Gay talked to one woman who says this scheme cost her more than just money.
She thought she was never going to get caught. I really never thought she was going to get caught.
For a year and a half, Victoria Hampton has been waiting for justice. She says in 2021, she was scammed out of $1,800 by 25-year-old Megan Stoner after accepting an offer to sublet Stoner's apartment. But Hampton never got the keys or her money back. The only thing she got were excuses, including blaming sick relatives for the reason Stoner didn't move.
This is a clip from the story on WTHR covering Megan's arrest for the rental scheme. As they say in the clip, Megan showed a property that she had been evicted from but still had the keys to people claiming to be the property owner or landlord, or that she was looking for a subletter. She would collect a security deposit and first month's rent from them, totaling between $1,500 and $2,000. And then she would claim to get COVID or have a family emergency, pushing back the move-in date and eventually blocking the victim on Facebook. She found her victims mostly in Facebook groups for travel nurses or in Noblesville chatter. Here's an AI voice reading a police report from one of Megan's victims of the rental frauds.
On 12/30/2021, at approximately 12:23 p.m., I spoke to Madison Redacted, referencing fraud that took place over renting a house located at Redacted. Madison advised that she found this property listed and contacted Megan Stoner to rent the property. Madison told me that on 12/15/2021, she sent Megan $600 as a security deposit for the property. Madison told me that on 12/30/2021, she was supposed to send an additional $1,100 as payment to get the keys. Madison advised Megan wanted the payment first, and Megan was skeptical. Madison did not send the money as she thought it was a scam. Madison had Megan send her a signed receipt for the $600 she paid. Megan sent her a signed receipt. Madison told me that Megan sent her a lease for the home. Madison located an Adam Redacted who told her that she was scammed. I advised Madison not to speak to Megan any further. Madison told me that she spoke to the homeowner, Adam Redacted. I did not ask Madison to elaborate what she spoke to the homeowner about. I sent Madison an Axon link to upload the lease agreement Megan sent her and screenshot of their texting conversation. This case is similar to two other recent reports.
What I find fascinating is that Megan used her personal profile with her full name and a photo of herself as her profile photo. For much of the time she was running this scheme, her profile photo was a selfie of herself and Mike Pence. So think about that. Think about the level of social proof you have by featuring a photo of yourself with the former Vice President of the United States in your profile photo, while doing anything on social media, but especially as acting as some kind of authority. Take out what you think about politicians or Mike Pence. Having a photo with a high-powered government official likely made Megan seem more trustworthy to potential victims. And Chloe estimates that there were between 20 and 50 victims. However, in the probable cause affidavit, only 3 victims are named. Megan has admitted to Chloe, though, that there were more victims than the ones named in that probable cause affidavit.
I think there's a lot more than 4 to 5 victims that are named in the probable cause affidavit. A lot. My count at Facebook groups was 20 to 50.
I don't think it's that high, but I mean, I know it's higher than 3 or 4.
I of the people who said that they either had given you money, like travel nurses, I mean, I assume it's a lot higher than that.
And actually, the victim who speaks out in that news story about Megan's arrest was not one of the victims named in the probable cause affidavit. And when she contacted the police to give her story and be added, she couldn't be added to the lawsuit. And that's because she was a victim of a different rental scheme that Megan ran on a completely different house. And Megan has never been charged with that scheme that she ran. If Chloe's estimates of between 20 and 50 victims are true, Megan could have made anywhere from $30,000 on the low end to upwards of $100,000 on the high end. Completely shamelessly, using her real name and profile photo. She had to have known she'd eventually get caught, right? That actually keeps me up at night, wondering whether Megan knew she'd be caught. From my understanding, people who run fraud schemes like this typically use a false identity or have partners in crime that meet with the victims for them to give themselves some sort of plausible deniability. Not Megan, though. She used her full name, her actual Facebook account. It seems like she didn't care. And even more shamelessly, Megan still didn't pay her bills during this time. If you refer to her MyCase, Indiana's state record software, Megan has been evicted 4 times according to publicly available documents. Once in October of 2019 with her roommates, Ryan and Abby. Again in September of 2021 with those same roommates. In December of 2022, she was named on her own, and in May of 2023 as well. So she was struggling to pay or refusing to pay her rent around the time before and after she was running the rental scheme. So it kind of begs the question, where did that money go? And she was skipping out on other bills during that time as well. If you read through Megan's MyCase, there are several civil cases where she has been sued by moving companies and local businesses. Many of these small business owners tell the same story. Megan demanded their business, and she would pay with a check that would then bounce. She did this to cleaning services, to dog walkers, to moving companies, and the like. A former landlord of Megan's told me it was interesting because he lived in the property next door, and while she never had money for rent, he would observe her having the mobile dog groomer parked in the driveway to groom her dog, Coco. This is a luxury service. It's not something that you get when you're pinching pennies. It's especially not something that you do when you're withholding your rent from your landlord that lives next door and can see you receiving that luxury service. A particular egregious story I remember reading was during COVID. She claimed in a Fishers area Facebook group that she and her family were really sick. There was a family at that time who would make and deliver meals for people as a COVID business model, like a meal prep type service. They would sometimes take on clients that were sick or in need and not charge an additional fee for cooking, so long as the client paid for groceries. Megan requested the meals, citing herself being low income or in need due to being sick. The family delivered these meals contact-free, and Megan ghosted them without ever paying. I find it so fascinating that on one hand, she would present herself as some high-powered, wealthy political consultant, and on the other, she would steal services like this on the basis of her being low income. It's also particularly egregious because she stole from small businesses. I've said this in previous episodes, but it isn't like she's scamming a loaf of bread from a big box store because she's starving and needs to feed her family. That's obviously not right to steal that either, but it's more understandable than stealing labor from small businesses like a carpet cleaning service or a dog walker. I could tell a million stories, and they're buried in this Facebook page, but Will puts it the best here when talking about scamming small businesses.
I come from a family of business owners, small business owners. So somebody like him leasing cars, that Tesla isn't just that's his asset. That's how he makes his money. That's how he puts food on the table. Like, damn it, that man doesn't deserve to be scammed. He's working his butt off to make ends meet. And then you have people like Megan Stoner out there that are not only stealing his asset, but taking food off of his family's table. Because that's what you're doing whenever you scam an entrepreneur. You're taking food away from their children.
And if stealing from small businesses is not slimy enough, Megan's scams got even more brazen as time went on. You probably remember Edward Ma from previous episodes. He and Megan met on Twitter, where they both described their history with mental health. Edward is a part of a community that speaks freely and openly about mental health on Twitter, and he often posts inspiring, uplifting tweets for his followers to brighten their day. You'll remember that Megan kind of slow burned with him. She spoke to him a few times per week for about a year before she invited him to come and spend the weekend with her in Indianapolis. This wasn't a romantic type of situation. Edward was going through a hard time, and Megan knew this because he confided in her and spoke about it on social media. So she suggested that he get away from his stresses that he had been dealing with in his living situation by visiting her in Indianapolis. Edward lives in Nova Scotia, Canada.
That as I was living at, it was so in my head, it basically forced to move back to my parents for that bit, which is like the worst thing that could happen to me. I was going from like mental health. I would not want to play get away from this. The whole thing.
Edward spent Labor Day in Indianapolis, and it wasn't too eventful. Megan took him to a few of her favorite restaurants, but they mostly spent time in her house and just hung out. Edward went home, but continued confiding in Megan about his living situation. This is when Megan began the scam. Megan had been presenting herself as a high-powered Indiana politico to Edward, who isn't super familiar with American politics, at least how the system works, being that he's Canadian. So Megan told Edward that she could help him find housing through some of her high-powered Indiana political clients.
Pretend to be based in Canada and a couple of high-level politicians. You go out of a place to live, so she pretended to be one of this friendly, or actually, I'll help you get a place in Nova Scotia. You have to give me so much money for the down payment. And at that time, I was like really emotionally vulnerable, and I was just desperate to get out, right?
So what Megan did here is she texted him from Google Voice numbers, pretending to be someone else, claiming that this person was an Indiana politico that would buy the home for Edward to live in as an investment property. The only condition was that Edward had to send money for a down payment to show that he had skin in the game. I was confused by this story at first. When I interviewed Edward, from the story I had heard on social media, I was under the impression that Megan started a GoFundMe for him and kept the funds for himself. He explained to me that he did have a GoFundMe as well at one point, which he raised a couple $1,000s from to help pay some debt off with. He says that Megan copied his idea but was not able to raise any money for herself from it. But this was not a case of a stolen GoFundMe. Megan fully Nigerian princed Edward. She pretended to be someone else, taking advantage of him when she knew he was super vulnerable, draining his savings. $5,000. The character that Megan made actually kept requesting more funds until Edward said that he didn't have anything else to give. And then the character threatened to sue him.
Well, I'm going to sue you.
Sound familiar? Getting adversarial? Fake Google numbers? Impersonating political figures? I mean, this has all of the makings of a classic Megan story that you've heard previously, but it's so much worse. Just when Edward didn't think that things could get worse, suddenly he's out of a ton of money, which he had been saving up to move out and fix the problem she said she would help him solve. The worst part of this story is that Edward was never able to get justice from Megan through the legal system. Being that he lives in Canada, he felt the hoops were just too much to jump through. He never even bothered to sue her or something like that. Instead, he just felt it was his duty to share his story online to warn people to stay vigilant from scammers. He told me that money, the $5,000, he could easily make back. He would rather just move on and forget about it. There's a lot of components about this story that really disturb me. Obviously, it's a lot of money that she stole from him. But I think the worst part is that she waited so long to do it. This isn't just friending a bunch of people and requesting $10 from them and moving on to the next. She waited until he was at his lowest to steal from him. To be that cold and heartless is a level of crazy and honestly sociopathic that I'm not comfortable with, quite frankly. And this isn't the only time she has stolen large sums of money from people that she's close to. You'll recall from episode 3, her first civil case in her My Case record is from 2017 when she stole $20,000 from her Aunt Linda, racking up a credit card bill over about a year that high when she was very young, I believe in high school, before her aunt noticed.
On December 11th, 2020, at approximately 1946 hours, I, Wesley, redacted, an officer with the Fishers Police Department, took a report involving suspicious activity. The victim, Scott Redacted, advised that one of his clients, Megan Stoner, has been involved in a string of fraudulent text messages impersonating political figures and requesting an appointment with Scott. Scott advised that he assumes Megan is involved because the political figures say that Megan is the reference in which they received Scott's personal cell phone number. Megan has Scott's personal cell phone to schedule appointments. Scott advised that Megan has been a client of his since January 2020. Scott advised that Megan told him she is a sexual assault victim and to be more comfortable brings her friend Abby to all her appointments. Scott advised that Megan has 2 to 3 appointments per week.
So now we've gotten to the infamous chiropractor story. Social media became aware of the saga around June of 2021, but the story actually starts in January of 2020 and heats up around December 2020. So another slow burn story. What's weird is the story isn't technically financial fraud, but you'll understand in a minute why I decided to put it into this episode.
Scott advised the first text message he received was from Eric Holcomb and was received on November 21st, 2020 at approximately 12:33 p.m. The message stated that Megan recommended Scott and that Eric Holcomb wanted to schedule an appointment with Scott. Other political figures soon messaged Scott. These figures included Vice President Mike Pence, Donald Trump, the Secret Service, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Stephen Mnuchin, Rudy Giuliani, Chad Wolf, and Mark Meadows. Scott advised that there were at least 12 political figures who texted him from 12 unique numbers asking to schedule an appointment. Scott advised that the messages are received at a roughly 3-to-1 ratio to his replies. I ran the suspect's information, and I found a case involving fraud where the two Megan and Abby were identified as the suspects responsible for similar deception fraud behavior. See case redacted from Noblesville Police Department for further. Scott thinks Megan will at some point make false allegations against him. I advised Scott to install video cameras in his office. Scott advised he is in the process of doing that and has already had Megan and other clients sign consent to be video recorded during treatments. I advised Scott to limit contact with Megan and not provide any official documentation to Megan with his signature. Scott advised Megan has already tried to obtain a letter of recommendation from Scott and told him to send it to a fraudulent fax number. As an additional precaution, I suggested Scott change all of his passwords to his personal accounts and financial institutions. I also advised Scott to monitor his credit and all active on his accounts. Scott said he understood. Scott advised he is scared to simply stop service with Megan, fearful she will retaliate in some way. I will not be investigating this case any further.
Both of the police report readings were done by AI. So, a lot to unpack here. But again, you'll recognize this behavior. Now, in this story, Megan's roommate was involved. I haven't discussed her much on the podcast. She lived with Megan and did participate in schemes with her for a while. While Megan has claimed to people that these schemes were her roommate's ideas, I will let you draw your own conclusion about that, but I will say this. Since her roommate stopped living with Megan, she's lived a quiet life. I can't find her on social media, and I can't find a further criminal record. You know from listening to this podcast that Megan's sketchy behavior like this predates her graduating from high school and moving in with a roommate. But again, back to the story at hand, a lot going on here. So Megan went to this chiropractor for a while, a long time actually, and the chiropractor became so concerned with her strange behavior that he called the police on her. And she had her own commentary about this situation as well, which she posted to Twitter.
Today has been a hard day. My chiropractor filed a police report that said he is afraid I will make false sexual assault allegations against him. This is really hard. Please send positive vibes. So I sit here raw and vulnerable. I share with a medical provider one sentence about my trauma, and they made a police report afraid I would accuse them. Guys, I don't know what to do. Someone please tell me not to shut down. So I'm the one that has the loss of job because of a false police report. And now my chiropractor terminated services. WTF? Hey y'all, I'm trying to request a refund from the chiropractor that is whack. He filed a police report on me and I believe he over manipulated my body. Any advice?
That's the AI voice of Megan reading some of her Twitter posts from March to July of 2021. So why am I putting this story here? Well, you heard a bit at the end of those Twitter posts that she was trying to figure out from her followers how to get her money back from this chiropractor. So there's that smaller financial incentive. I also love how she posted all of these things about being upset about the police report before she posted about wanting her money back and being overly manipulated. To me, the over-manipulated comment is probably the closest thing we will get to her admitting that the chiropractor was probably right about his suspicions. And I really feel for that poor guy. But the biggest thing here to me is what she stood to gain financially if she did falsely accuse him. This was peak Me Too era. She had a witness with her. I'm sure if Megan actually falsely accused this chiropractor, she could have gotten a 6-figure settlement without really even having to do very much. If you think back to the story with Megan's pastors from episode 3, you'll remember she falsely accused them of sexual inappropriate advances with her when she was 11 or 12 years old. In that case, they immediately called the police, which they noted was atypical. Typically, a pastor or a business owner would be so scared of this story getting out that they would do anything to prevent that from happening, even if it isn't true. With Megan, it was so obvious in that case that they went straight to the police. That seems to have been what happened here as well. And thank God. I mean, this man's business could have been ruined, and he doesn't deserve that. That is why business owners who do nothing wrong sometimes still pay settlements. Because they can't risk losing their business from one crazy person. Had Megan been able to keep it together and not pretend to be Donald Trump Jr. and Rudy Giuliani on Google Voice numbers, she could have gotten a life-changing amount of money. She could be out of debt and not worry about money for a while. And I don't support that. That would have been highly unethical. Thank God she was not able to do that. But this is one of the stories that's always been so puzzling to me because I can tell she set herself up in this certain way to do something so awful. I mean, to carry this plot out for over a year. Clearly she was trying to do something, and thank God it failed because she can't control herself to not send a bunch of strange text messages. And that goes to show that maybe this is a bit of a compulsion with Megan. So a couple takeaways from these stories of her financial schemes. First of all, Megan has not had a real legitimate job in a long time. Maybe she hasn't had one ever. She's also not great with money. When she has money, she seems to potentially have made substantial amounts from the schemes she ran. She still does not pay her bills. And third, she is highly unethical. She does not seem to show remorse for making terrible accusations against individuals who seek to help her in order to achieve financial gain. And she seems perfectly comfortable taking things from small landlords, small business owners, family members, friends that she's known for a long time. As you can tell by now, Megan also has a history of making sexual abuse allegations. This is an extremely sensitive subject, but a very necessary one to cover how Megan eventually got caught. On the next episode, we will dive into Megan's history with sexual assault and allegations she's made. So, until next time, I'm Amanda, and this is Don't Waste This Fucking Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner.